By the 9 and 4, welcome back to the library for our last entry in Series 2 of Intro to the Realms. I am the recorder, and we will be covering the very source of the greeting that each of you have heard time and again as we have explored the realms. The 9 and 4, objects of ancient tales, supreme power, and as old as the realms themselves. We will also cover in brief how the subjects of each of our tales are doing, their situation and disposition. We will finish off on a bit of a look forward, with a muse on the new avenues that are being investigated for our future explorations. Regular visitors and prospective patrons, as well as any and all that are joining us in our explorations of the realm of Jam'mar should, as always, be aware that these entries are just meant as introductions to the subjects they cover. Future entries expanding upon them will be forthcoming, pursuant to interest of course. Starting off, what are the 9 and 4? And why are they so important that they are seen as something to be referenced when one greets or parts with others? The 9 and 4 are artifacts, and omnipotent ones at that, given the proper conditions. You see, these were made by the Nine Wings himself, creator of the realms, and as such are far more powerful than any else created within the realms. However, while still having effects and properties individually, their full and terrible power is constrained to only being available when all 13 of the artifacts are both gathered and properly activated. The 13 artifacts are obviously divided into two groups, the 9 and the 4. Each group has its own general powers or effects. The only universal traits between all of them are two-sided. One who possesses any one of the artifacts is virtually invisible to direct scrying or other observational powers, while also being able to detect the presence of other artifacts of the 9 and 4, but only vaguely, without direction or proximity. This is perhaps a feature to ensure that they are always able to be found and eventually brought together and used, or at least to keep them in circulation. Furthermore, one cannot lose or have one of these artifacts stolen from them, only by giving it willingly or having it collected after the death of its previous owner, or perhaps found after being willingly discarded, can they be transferred from one person to another. Also, Analar, dragons, and the gods cannot even touch any of them without it being whisked off to some other random place within the realms. This last effect seems to be a new rule, perhaps added by a recent use of the artifacts, because there are multiple accounts of the 9 and 4 being gathered and used by the gods, most heavily during the Age of Valor, to repair and counter the daemon's effects on the world. Beyond these universal traits, the 9, which are described as crystalline orbs about the size of an onycryst, filled with two commingling yet separate fluids, prevent their owners from having their worldview and philosophic principles unwillingly changed or subverted in any way, even via magical or chemical means. They also seem to be more aware of the principles and philosophies of others, and are more able to see through deceptions and disguises that rely or involve these matters. The 4 colors that are universally recorded as being among the options seen are green, gold, red, and black. However, it should be noted that in at least half of the 9, the secondary color is none at all. A clear, equally viscous liquid mixes and flows with the other color in 4 of the 9. And it is of record that one of the 9 has no color at all within it, and can apparently be easily mistaken as a standard Oni-crystal. While the 9 are physically uniform, the 4 are anything but. Each of the 4 is a book, tome, or other bound written work. The size, languages involved, materials used, format of script, all these factors and more are all but accepted to vary with each appearance of one of the 4, and none ever matches another. This makes tracking and locating the 4 nearly impossible. Unless you already have one of them, that is. For in the many pages are vast numbers of hidden secrets, and among them are the ability to find the other 4. Normally described as vague hints in the edges of the pages or like. Moreover, only through rites described and detailed across the 4 can one properly evoke the full power of the collection. Each of the 4 is a full and complete masterwork in the essence of one of 4 philosophical extremes: law and order, beneficence and good, chaos and anarchy, as well as evil and selfishness. The reading of which can seriously shake the pillars of one's mind, soul, and morality. And it is recommended that one of the 9 be owned to counter this, without which, or possessing a personal will of absolute star metal, one will find themselves forever changed by the experience, and rarely for the better. After reading all 4 of the tomes, without the protections described above, the individual having done so will bear little resemblance, mentally or psychologically, to the person that was before. Extremes in opinion and temperament, when those stances are challenged, backed by the ability to debate and converse on those stances to a near unimpeachable degree, and with a near zealotous intent, leads those so affected to live lonely lives. So, what happens if you activate the full collection? Well, much like the rubbing of the lamp of a genie, the signing of a pact with a powerful outsider, or catching a leprechaun, the 9 and 4 are a method to achieve the granting of a wish. Unlike the examples above, where there are a whole slew of concerns in how the wish is made, what words are spoken, and how cruel and capricious the wish granter is feeling that day, the wishes granted by the 9 and 4 are as without consequence or misconstruing as reality itself will allow. For they are granted directly by the 9 Wings himself, in person. With the 9 Wings himself granting the desires of who manage to find, collect, and properly use the 9 and 4, the possibilities are nearly endless for those that succeed in this task. However, there are some wishes that, while still granted, may result in the subject no longer remaining a part of our reality. This is most often when the result of their wish would cause a significant and dramatic shift, change, or other realignment in the order of baseline reality. However, the subject is merely shifted into whatever variant timeline that matches or is best compatible with the subject's new desire, and then they will find themselves there, most often completely unaware of the change. Such events are rare, it should be noted, as very few have desires that require such extremes to satisfy. Divine power, both for the subject of a wish and taken from another by a subject, have been recorded in the past. The cleansings of persons and artifacts of certain traits, qualities, or curses, with no room for error or chance of backfire, or the enhancement of oneself or one's people. These are just the least of possibilities for these well-known, often looked for, but rarely successfully collected artifacts. The lore of the 9 and 4 is common enough that nearly all know of them, and that with each use they will again scatter to the edges of the 9 Wings domain to begin the cycle again. The thing is that while each use in the past was conducted upon a planet, in these cases Jam'mMar herself, the inversion of color and light that happens each time the creator of all is called to the mortal plane makes it clear what is happening, and then they would scatter again across Jam'mMar. However, with the age of stars and the expansion of the realms, it is heavily postulated that the next time they are collected and used, anywhere in the Credelis cluster could see one of these artifacts appear. This, of course, means it will be literally astronomically harder tasks to seek and collect them, turning an event that happened a handful of times since the end of the reign to something that may not even happen once in an age. Such thoughts weigh heavy on those who either possess or seek to obtain the legendary 9 and 4. Objects, by their use, can reshape the course of history. And that is where we shall conclude our look at the 9 and 4, and move on to a quick look at how each of our groups whose tales we have been following is doing. Beginning with Sarge and his team, they are currently working on fortifying their new home from the expected attempts to take this most useful of ancient creations, a fully automated and programmable system-sized factory with a star forge at its heart to fuel its operations. While the large 13-mile radius gate ring that serves as the only entry to pass the clouds of destructive energies that envelop the system was already fairly heavily armed and designed to be a defensive nightmare for any attackers. Many of these systems are in dire needs of hands-on work and maintenance before being able to be brought to full readiness. Beyond these matters of housekeeping and logistics, Sarge is slowly unveiling the data crystal obtained in his closest encounter with the mysterious antagonist yet, and will most likely resume his hunt as soon as he has the scent again. Spirits are high overall, but everybody knows that no matter how well they repair this gatehouse, without more staff, they will not be able to properly defend and hold against a properly numerically large or potent force. Returning to Jam'mMar herself and the situation at Farmhold, Justique and Lassen are managing the best they can, advancing the plans laid out in preparation for the coming conflict. Chandlos and the Celestians, as well as the rest of the leaders of the community, agreed that keeping Cathian's disappearance unremarked was best for the morale of the still young and untested community. With shortfalls in materials still a looming issue, as well as months of trying to find Cathy on his own with no meaningful progress, Scry Ars has left Farmhold on a temporary basis to, as he put it, make an ass out of myself and maybe, just maybe, be able to find us some help. They are completely oblivious to the fact that by the actions of Tagalon, one of the most skilled and potent mercenary teams in the realms, the Brothers Calibers, were even now on their way to begin investigating and seeking out the location of that last lord. Furthermore, Tag's new boss has made his intent to reinforce Sarge and his unit clear, and no doubt has begun to recruit men, women, and materiel to have ready for when Sarge and his unit inevitably go looking for those very things. The news of Star Walker being out of commission has disturbed Tag greatly, and he is throwing himself into whatever tasks he can to avoid overly thinking on the matter. Percival has still not been seen or located. However, a message from him confirmed his living at least, and that he was investigating a possible leftover from the Wars of Feather and Scale, with no clear description beyond that. All in all, Tag sees this first act close on a low but rising note. Unbeknownst to all, yet no less potentially important to their mutual fates, Optor, now joined by Unka, is set to begin crossing over the Antani-fested volcanic mountain ridge that lies between him and an escape from this world, in the hopes of returning with the forces needed to defeat such a collection of threats to the wider realms. Unbeknownst to them, to do so will be the first in a chain of events that will bring the forces of the realms to the brink of potential civil war, and perhaps even beyond it. Speaking of war, in an attempt to limit the possible long-term damage that such interpower disputes can inflict, the ancient empire is spearheading a call to codify rules and regulations for how war should be conducted, and, with the barest margins of votes, has successfully forced the creation process of these rules to begin. The various proposals and laws, particularly regarding the classification of sovereign powers and the ability or inability to ask for or receive support and aid from other sovereign powers in time of war, has caused a firestorm of politicking and the potential formation of an entire handful of new minor, yet legally recognized inter-system sovereignties. The current chaos in the halls of the council building upon the Expeditus Primus is perhaps the most active and frenzied they have ever been. Other forces as well have begun to move, ones led by forces unknown to us at the moment, be they for good or for ill. Be assured, all will be revealed in future tales and entries. And speaking of future entries, let me wrap things up with some scheduling announcements and the like. First, for those that enjoyed the first episode of our podcast, technical issues aside, and were wondering where the next episode is, fear not, it is on its way. Soonish. Due to issues of scheduling and technical problems, things have not been able to work out as we had originally hoped. We are aiming to have it all sorted soon, and are aiming to continue on a better foot than we started with. Thank you for your patience. Next, just as with last series, I will be releasing the tales thus far for each of the major storylines, and that should cover roughly the next 2 weeks of releases, after which is where things may vary somewhat from our normal schedule. Beyond getting the podcast back on its feet and going, I would also like to take some time to try to see how reasonable it will be to work in some animations and other visual elements for our entries. Lacking any proper artistic skill or experience, I will nonetheless see what I can come up with, that I am also able to commit to as far as a per entry production time investment, as there are so many hours in the day. However, once I start Series 3 back up, I do want to have a base benchmark of quality that can be expected by my perceptive patrons and regular viewers. So, I feel this is a necessary step to take for the long-term quality of the entries, and for your entertainment. To that end, before I start Series 3, I most likely may be releasing smaller bits and pieces of things to see what my perceptive patrons and regular visitors think. This is all very up in the air and unknown to me, so I ask you to please bear with me as I muddle through this. Your comments, suggestions, and other support are invaluable to me, especially now. And once the tools to do so are unlocked, I will be regularly asking for your inputs and thoughts with those tools. Main topic, character updates, housekeeping now complete. Oh, that's right. I want to thank you, as always, right here at the end of our second series of Intro to the Realms, for your time and your interest, your comments and your support. It all means so very much to me. Thank you. Now, until you next make your way back to the library for our next entry, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching.